The grand, crystal chandeliered living room of the multi-million-dollar mansion in Long Island was filled with the suffocating scent of expensive cigars and artificial arrogance. Tonight was supposed to be a private family celebration for Brandon's recent financial promotion, but for me, it had quickly turned into a calculated cage of public humiliation. I was standing dead center on the imported Persian silk rug, wearing a simple, faded denim jacket and worn-out sneakers. My hair was tied back with a cheap plastic clip, and my hands were still slightly red from scrubbing the grand marble kitchen counters for the past 4 hours. To the people sitting on the white leather sofas, I was nothing but an embarrassing, low-class eyesore. A thick, heavy brick of $100 bills, exactly $10,000 in cold cash, was suddenly slammed violently against my chest, the paper edges cutting into my skin before the bills scattered lazily across the floor, landing in the dirt right at my feet. Pick up that money, you pathetic, crawling parasite, and get your lower-class filth out of my son's life forever, Victoria Cole hissed, her voice dripping with venomous, newly rich elitism as she adjusted her heavy gold necklaces. She stood over me, looking down her nose as if she were staring at a cockroach. Did you honestly think a faceless, penniless girl who sweeps floors and scrubs toilets could ever legally marry into the Cole dynasty? That money is more than your entire family earns in a year, Audrey. Take it, crawl on your knees to clean up your mess, and vanish before the security guards drag you out like trash. My heart didn't break. It turned into a solid, freezing block of absolute Arctic ice. I slowly lifted my eyes, looking at Brandon, the man who had been my boyfriend for 2 long years. He was the man I had supported when he was crying in his car, unable to pay his monthly rent. Now, wearing a brand new designer suit, he sat quietly on the sofa, swirling a glass of vintage scotch, completely refusing to meet my gaze. "Mom is right, Vivienne," Brandon said coldly, his voice stripped of every single ounce of the tenderness he used to promise me. He took a slow, arrogant sip of his drink. "We operate in a completely different financial tier now. My family just signed a multi-million-dollar corporate lease for this entire estate. I am rubbing shoulders with Wall Street hedge fund managers. Having a live-in maid as a girlfriend is actively destroying my social credit. Take the $10,000. It's the most generous severance package a girl like you will ever see in her lifetime." A dangerous, quiet, and utterly glacial smile slowly spread across my face. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I bent down slowly, my fingers calmly gathering the scattered $100 bills from the rug, stacking them into a neat, perfect pile. "Thank you for the cash, Victoria," I whispered, my voice dropping into a terrifyingly calm, melodic register that caused the air in the warm room to instantly drop in temperature. "I will make sure to use every single cent of this to pay for your moving expenses." Before they could even process my words, I turned on my heel and walked out of the heavy mahogany front doors, stepping into the freezing night rain. They thought they had just crushed a helpless, broken orphan. What their fragile, newly rich minds could never comprehend is that the Cole family didn't own a single square inch of this estate. They had merely signed a temporary lease with a private holding firm. And that holding firm? It was a minor, low-level subsidiary of the Montgomery Global Trust, the largest private landowning empire in the country. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my encrypted satellite smartphone, and bypassed the public networks, dialing a direct, maximum priority executive hotline. "Harrison," I commanded coldly as the call picked up instantly. "The field trial is officially over. The Cole family is leasing estate Block 4 in Long Island. I want you to activate the ultimate sovereignty clause. Buy out the master deed of this entire property within the next 60 minutes. And Harrison, prepare an immediate, absolute eviction notice for commercial material breach. I am walking back into that house tonight as their new landlady." To understand how the sole biological heir to a $70 billion real estate empire ended up scrubbing floors for a toxic, newly rich family, you have to understand the unyielding, ironclad doctrine of my father, Charles Montgomery. He was a man who owned the very ground beneath the financial districts of New York, London, and Tokyo. Yet he despised nothing more than the parasitic arrogance of generational wealth. Vivienne, he had told me before, handed me the master keys to our family's sovereign trust. A true ruler doesn't judge an empire from the height of the penthouse. You must lower yourself to the dirt, live among the people who believe a flashy car and a leased house make them gods. Watch how they treat those they deem beneath them. Only when you have looked up from the bottom can you rightfully command the top. For 2 long years, I honored his word. I buried my identity behind a multi-layered cryptographic wall, living as Vivienne Ross, a quiet, simple girl working ordinary retail shifts. And that was when I met Brandon Cole. When we started dating, he was nothing but a terrified, broke junior analyst, constantly on the verge of tears because his bank account was completely overdrawn. I saw a spark of drive in him, so I became his silent benefactor. I used my anonymous corporate connections to quietly manipulate his firm's algorithmic trading data, funneling massive, multi-million-dollar client portfolios directly into his account. I literally handed him his career on a silver platter, allowing him to take 100% of the public credit and secure a promotion that pushed his family into a flashy, leased luxury lifestyle. The moment the money hit his account, the humble analyst vanished. His family instantly leased this massive Long Island mansion, filled it with leased sports cars, and began treating me like a shameful, low-class servant who was lucky to even breathe the same air as them. For the past month, Victoria Cole had treated me like a slave, forcing me to clean their grease traps and wash their floors just to prove to Brandon that I was beneath their status. Tonight, I gave them their final test, and they failed catastrophically. I stood on the wet sidewalk outside the iron gates of the mansion, the freezing rain drenching my hair as I held the secure smartphone to my ear. On the other end, the rapid, thunderous clacking of a high-security mainframe computer echoed through the receiver as Harrison Vance executed my executive clearance commands. "Executing the master buyout protocol now, Ms. Montgomery," Harrison Vance reported, his deep voice radiating a cold, lethal level of legal authority. "The master deed for the Long Island estate is held by a premium real estate trust. We have just injected a $50 million cash buyout offer directly into their corporate escrow. The automated systems have accepted the premium, boss. The digital signatures are finalized. As of exactly 4 minutes ago, the Montgomery Trust is the absolute, unconditional sovereign owner of the deed, the house, and the land beneath the Cole family's feet. "And what about their lease agreement, Harrison?" I asked, my emerald green eyes narrowing as a dangerous, chilling calm settled over my heart. "The lease they signed contains a strict zero-tolerance commercial compliance clause under Section 12. Harrison chuckled dryly, his tone dripping with professional corporate contempt. "Any tenant engaging in material fraud, illegal asset concealment, or public behavioral liabilities grants the landlord the immediate, unconditional right to terminate the lease with a 0-hour grace period." "We have just pulled Brandon Cole's personal tax records, boss. He used falsified corporate expense statements to secure the lease approval. They are in massive material breach of federal law." "Excellent," I whispered, stepping back toward the grand iron gates, which automatically swung open as my phone's biometric signature connected to the property's security grid. "Issue the immediate, absolute eviction notice. Have the county sheriff units and the moving crews arrive at the property in exactly 30 minutes. I am going back inside to collect my belongings and to deliver their final notice in person." "The Montgomery Empire is behind you, boss. The eviction is fully active." I hung up the phone, dropping the stack of Victoria's $10,000 into my denim jacket pocket. I walked back up the long, grand stone driveway, the heavy rain washing away the last remnants of my patience. The submissive girlfriend was dead. The sovereign landlady had officially arrived. The heavy, solid mahogany front doors of the Long Island mansion were violently thrown open for the second time that night, the loud mechanical thud echoing through the grand, silent foyer. I walked back into the crystal chandeliered living room. My denim jacket was dripping wet from the freezing rain, leaving a trail of cold water droplets across the polished white marble floor. I didn't look like a defeated, weeping orphan who had just been thrown out into the mud. I walked with a slow, measured, and terrifying precision, my emerald green eyes locked onto the two parasites sitting on the white leather sofa. Victoria Cole was in the middle of pouring herself another glass of expensive wine, laughing loudly with her son about how easily they had gotten rid of me. The moment she saw me standing in the doorway, her laughter abruptly choked in her throat. She slammed her crystal wine glass onto the table, her face twisting into an expression of pure, newly rich, aristocratic fury. You crazy, delusional beggar!" Victoria roared, standing up so fast her gold necklaces clinked violently against her chest. She pointed a shaking, manicured finger at my face. "How dare you trespass back into my son's estate? Did the $10,000 I threw at your feet go straight to your pathetic head? Brandon, call the police right now. I want this filthy live-in maid dragged out of my house in handcuffs." Brandon didn't even look up from his phone at first, his thumb swiping through stock market updates with a smug, detached indifference. "Vivienne, you are making a catastrophic mistake. I told you our relationship is over. You are embarrassing yourself. Take the cash and get out before my private security detail physically removes you from the neighborhood." I didn't answer. I walked straight toward the center of the room, stopping directly in front of the massive crystal coffee table. I reached into the deep pocket of my wet denim jacket, pulled out the heavy brick of $10,000 in cold cash, and with a sudden, explosive movement, I slammed the money directly into Victoria Cole's face. The heavy stack of $100 bills struck her chest violently, the paper band snapping open instantly. Hundreds of crisp green bills scattered through the air like a storm, raining down onto her expensive clothes and falling into the vintage Scotch glass Brandon was holding. "What did you just do, you low-class psycho?" Victoria shrieked, stumbling backward into the sofa, clutching her chest in absolute shock. "I told you outside, Victoria," I said, my voice dropping into a freezing, razor-sharp, melodic resonance that completely commanded the silent room. Every single word cut through the air like a surgical blade. "I am using this exact $10,000 to pay for your moving expenses, because as of exactly 10 minutes ago, you no longer have a single legal right to stand on this rug." Brandon finally dropped his scotch glass, the liquid spilling across the Persian rug as he leaped to his feet, his face turning a violent shade of red. "Are you completely insane, Vivienne? This mansion is under a premium multi-year lease signed by my corporate account. The landlord is a multi-billion-dollar real estate holding firm. You are a nameless retail clerk who lives in a studio apartment. You don't own anything." "Your lease, Brandon?" I laughed softly, a dangerous glacial sound that caused the hairs on his arms to stand up. "That's funny, because if you look at your corporate email directory right now, you will see that your precious lease has just been permanently vaporized." Brandon let out a desperate, forced laugh, trying to shake off the sudden, suffocating feeling of terror creeping into his chest. "You are bluffing, Vivienne. You are nothing but a pathetic liar trying to scare my family because I dumped you for a real heiress. I am going to call the master property management agent right now and have you thrown in a federal prison." He pulled out his smartphone, his fingers flying across the screen as he dialed the private hotline of the elite real estate firm that managed the Long Island estate block. He put the phone on speaker, a smug, arrogant smirk returning to his face as he stared at me. "Watch closely, Vivienne. This is what true corporate power looks like." The phone rang exactly once. It was picked up instantly, but the voice on the other end wasn't the calm, professional executive agent Brandon was expecting. It was a voice filled with an absolute, breathless, and visceral state of panic. "Mr. Cole," the agent gasped, his voice cracking through the speakerphone so loudly it bounced off the high gold ceilings. "I was just trying to reach you. We have an unprecedented, catastrophic emergency at our corporate headquarters." Brandon's smirk froze. A cold bead of sweat began to form on his forehead. What are you talking about? I am calling to report a trespassing made at my estate. I need your security team to remove her immediately." "We can't do that, Mr. Cole," the agent shrieked on the other end, the sound of papers and keyboards slamming frantically in the background. At exactly midnight, a sovereign cash injection of $50 million was wired directly into our master escrow account by the Montgomery Global Trust. They bought out the absolute master deed of your entire property with a 0-hour completion clause. We no longer own the house, Mr. Cole. We don't own the land. The Montgomery Trust is now your absolute unconditional landlord, and they have just executed an immediate eviction protocol against your family. Brandon felt his knees give out slightly, his hand shaking so violently the phone nearly slipped from his grip. No, that's impossible. We signed a legal lease. They can't just kick us out. We have a grace period. You don't have a single second, Mr. Cole, the agent cried out in pure terror. The Montgomery legal phalanx pulled your personal financial records 10 minutes ago. They uncovered that you used falsified corporate expense statements and fraudulent asset data to secure the lease approval. Under Section 12 of the Master Compliance Charter, you are in massive material breach of federal law. The lease is null and void. The new landlord has issued a 0-hour emergency removal order. If you are not out of that house immediately, you will be arrested for commercial fraud. The phone line went completely dead. The living room fell into a terrifying, suffocating silence. The absolute illusion of the Cole dynasty's wealth had been completely shattered in a matter of seconds. Victoria Cole collapsed onto the white leather sofa, her mouth hanging wide open, her face a pale, ghostly white, as she stared at the scattered $100 bills on the floor. Brandon slowly lifted his eyes, looking at me as if he were staring at a literal ghost. He looked at my wet denim jacket, then looked down at my hands, finally realizing that the woman he had treated like a worthless slave held the absolute power of life and death over his entire future. "No," Brandon whispered, his voice cracking into a pathetic, trembling sob. "No. The Montgomery Trust. That's the largest real estate empire in the country. Vivienne, who the hell are you?" I reached into my denim jacket pocket, pulled out a pair of pristine white silk gloves, and pulled them over my fingers with a slow, terrifying elegance. "I am Vivienne Montgomery, Brandon," I said, my emerald eyes locking onto his terrified face with an icy, unyielding dominance. "My father owns the very ground beneath the financial district you work in. I didn't scrub your mother's kitchen because I needed your pathetic validation. I did it because I was honoring my family's heritage with silence. But you forgot the ultimate lesson of wealth, Brandon. Never stomp on the person who built the house you are trying to lease." Right on cue, the loud, echoing wail of police sirens and the heavy roar of commercial moving trucks erupted from the front gates of the estate, their flashing red and blue lights cutting through the darkness of the windows and painting the living room walls in a violent shade of warning crimson. I checked my grandfather's platinum Patek Philippe watch. The county sheriff deputies and my private moving crews are officially inside the gates, Brandon. Your 0-hour starts right now. The grand entrance of the mansion didn't just open, it was violently breached. 4 uniformed county sheriff deputies, faces grim under the flashing crimson lights of their patrol cars, marched into the living room. Their heavy tactical boots left muddy, wet tracks across the pristine white marble foyer. Directly behind them was a tight phalanx of 20 professional asset disposal movers dressed in black industrial uniforms, carrying massive, empty wooden crates and heavy rolls of industrial packing tape. Victoria Cole shrieked in pure, unadulterated terror, scrambling backward onto the white leather sofa, her gold chains rattling violently against her throat. What? What is the meaning of this modern-day barbarism? Deputies, arrest this crazy girl standing in my living room. She is a trespassing maid. She threw cash at my face. This is an elite, high society private estate. Brandon Cole, his face a ghostly pale shade of green, tried to step in front of the lead deputy, his hands shaking so violently his expensive designer watch rattled on his wrist. "Officer, I am a senior financial vice president. I signed a multi-year corporate lease for this property. You cannot bring industrial laborers into my residence at midnight. This is a severe civil violation." The lead deputy didn't blink. He reached into his leather tactical belt, pulled out a thick, official, legal document bearing a massive, blood-red federal judiciary stamp, and slammed it directly against Brandon's custom-tailored suit jacket. "Brandon Cole," the deputy announced, his voice echoing through the high ceilings with the cold, crushing weight of sovereign law. "We are executing an immediate, 0-hour emergency eviction and asset seizure warrant issued by the New York Supreme Court at exactly 12:05 a.m. The primary deed holder, the Montgomery Global Trust, has officially terminated your lease due to systemic commercial fraud, identity misrepresentation, and criminal material breach of contract. Effective immediately. You own absolutely nothing inside this perimeter." Before Brandon could even process the words, the lead deputy turned to the 20 movers standing behind him. "Execute the order. Strip the house. Leave nothing but the structural walls." The living room erupted into a scene of absolute, terrifying corporate warfare. The movers moved with a mechanical, terrifying efficiency. The loud, screeching rip of heavy industrial packing tape tore through the silence of the mansion like gunfire. They began tearing down the custom silk curtains, wrapping the luxury crystal vases in bubble wrap, and hoisting the expensive leather sofas into the air. Victoria Cole went completely hysterical, throwing her body over an imported Italian marble statue. "No, stop them. This is my furniture. My son bought this to prove our status. You can't steal our lifestyle." One of the moving crew members looked down at his digital inventory tablet, then looked at Victoria with utter contempt. "Ma'am, this statue was leased using a corporate expense account that was officially frozen 20 minutes ago. Move your hands, or the deputies will assist you." The heavy click of leather dress shoes sounded from the foyer. Harrison Vance walked slowly into the living room, a long black cashmere overcoat draped elegantly over his towering frame. He didn't look at the chaos, his eyes fixed directly onto me, and he bent his body into a deep, respectful 90-degree bow from the waist. "The external perimeter is secure, Chairman Montgomery," Harrison reported with a cold, professional smile. "The central banking networks have just finalized the structural compliance logs. Brandon Cole's entire financial existence has been completely quarantined." Brandon stumbled backward, his breath catching in his throat as he looked at the legendary corporate executioner standing in his living room. Harrison Vance? The chief trustee of the Montgomery Global Empire? Why are you bowing to Vivienne? She is a nobody. She's a retail clerk. She is the sole biological owner of the very firm you work for, Mr. Cole, Harrison Vance replied, his gravelly voice dropping into a lethal register that silenced the room. He tapped his tablet computer, turning the screen to face Brandon's terrified eyes. "Let us talk about your prestigious promotion, Brandon. You truly believed you were a once-in-a-generation financial genius. You thought your firm promoted you based on your elite talent." Harrison let out a dry, chilling laugh that dripped with corporate mockery. "The truth, Mr. Cole, is that the Montgomery Trust holds a 60% controlling debt leverage position over your entire hedge fund. 2 years ago, Vivienne quietly ordered our automated algorithms to funnel massive, multi-million-dollar client portfolios directly into your junior directory just to protect your fragile ego because she loved you. You didn't earn that wealth, Brandon. Vivienne literally built your career out of the dirt. Brandon felt his entire mind spin into a state of visceral, primitive horror. The reality of his life was collapsing like a house of cards. Every luxury suit, every bottle of vintage scotch, and the very title he used to look down on me had been a direct gift from my silent mercy. But your greed completely blinded you, Brandon, Harrison continued mercilessly, clicking a final command on the tablet. At exactly 12:12 a.m., the global board of directors at your firm received the full forensic file regarding your falsified corporate expense statements. A unanimous vote was just finalized. Brandon Cole, you are permanently, unconditionally terminated for corporate forgery and embezzlement. Your professional licenses are revoked worldwide. You are officially ruined. Right on cue, a loud, heavy mechanical grinding sound erupted from the front driveway. Brandon rushed over to the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, his face pressing against the glass. Outside, under the freezing rain, a massive, heavy-duty flatbed tow truck was lifting his brand-new leased exotic sports car into the air. The tires were locked in steel chains, the wet metal reflecting the flashing red lights as the truck began to pull away, leaving nothing but an empty, oil-stained driveway. The illusion of his elite dynasty was dead. Within exactly 25 minutes, the massive, multi-million-dollar living room was stripped bare. The crystal chandeliers were lowered and packed, the Persian rugs were rolled away, and the white leather sofas were gone. Nothing remained but the cold, bare concrete floors and the naked, hollow walls. The county sheriff deputies stepped forward, their hands resting firmly on their tactical holsters as they surrounded Brandon and Victoria Cole. The 0-hour grace period has officially expired, the lead deputy commanded coldly. Step outside the iron gates immediately, or you will be transported directly to the county jail for criminal defiance of a federal eviction order. Victoria Cole was weeping openly now, her expensive makeup running down her wrinkled face in messy black streaks. She was wearing nothing but her silk pajamas, her bare feet shivering violently against the cold marble floor. She looked at the scattered $100 bills she had once thrown at me, desperately bending down to scoop them up from the dirt. But a deputy firmly stepped on her wrist, forcing her to drop the paper back into the mud. "Move, ma'am," the deputy said, without a single ounce of pity. They were escorted out of the grand mahogany doors, pushed past the wet stone pillars, and marched down the long driveway under the pouring, freezing night rain. The heavy iron gates of the estate slammed shut behind them with a deafening metallic crash that locked them out of the luxury world forever. Brandon Cole collapsed onto his knees directly on the muddy, wet grass of the public sidewalk outside the perimeter. The freezing rain soaked through his designer tuxedo within seconds, his slicked back hair falling across his face in messy, pathetic strands. He looked down at the heavy black plastic trash bags the movers had dumped into the mud next to him, containing nothing but his old, worn-out clothes from his days as a broke junior analyst. I walked slowly down the stone steps of my porch, holding a large, black silk umbrella that kept the rain completely away from my liquid gold blazer suit. I stopped right at the edge of the iron gates, looking down at his groveling, shivering figure through the steel bars. Brandon looked up, his eyes wide with an absolute breathless state of despair as he reached his trembling hands through the cold iron gates, crying into the dirt. "Vivienne, please, I beg you, look at my mother. She is freezing. Give us just one night of grace. I was blind. I was stupid. I thought the money was real. I still love you, Vivienne. We can get married tomorrow. Please don't destroy my life." I looked down at him with a cold, pitying smile that cut deeper than any blade. "You told me earlier tonight that a live-in maid damages your social credit, Brandon," I said, my voice carrying the absolute, crushing weight of a $70 billion real estate empress. "You told me to take your $10,000 and stay in the shadows where a low-class girl belongs. Now, you are standing on my land, begging for my mercy." I stepped back into the warmth of the estate, turning my back on his desperate screams as the security guards locked the secondary deadbolts. "Enjoy the rain, Brandon, because tomorrow morning, the federal prosecutors are coming for the rest of your life." The federal courtroom in the Eastern District of New York fell into a suffocating, terrifying silence. The absolute illusion of Brandon Cole's newly rich financial dynasty had been entirely ground into dust, leaving nothing but the raw, bleeding reality of criminal ruin. Brandon stood behind the defense table, his body shaking so violently his hands could barely rest on the polished mahogany wood. He was no longer wearing his $5,000 custom designer suits or his flashy luxury watch. He was dressed in a coarse, oversized orange inmate jumpsuit, his ankles heavily chained together, his face hollowed out by months of severe panic and pure despair. In the gallery behind him, Victoria Cole was completely unrecognizable. The arrogant, gold-dripping woman who had thrown a brick of cash at my chest was now wearing a faded, cheap dress, her face covered in messy tears as she watched the federal judge review the final asset forfeiture ledger. "Brandon Cole," the federal judge announced, her voice echoing through the massive courtroom with the cold, unyielding weight of federal law. "This court has reviewed the complete forensic financial evidence submitted by the Montgomery Global Trust. You did not merely violate a commercial lease, you systematically engaged in multi-layered corporate forgery, material identity theft, and the deliberate embezzlement of commercial credit lines to fund an elite lifestyle you could never legally afford. The law does not tolerate thieves who dress in luxury suits to defraud the honest infrastructure of the city." The judge slammed her heavy wooden gavel down with a thunderous crash that shattered the remaining hope in Brandon's soul. "I hereby sentence you to 14 years in a maximum security federal penitentiary with absolutely no opportunity for early parole," the judge decreed coldly. "Furthermore, under the federal asset forfeiture statutes, every single asset under your name, including your frozen bank accounts, your leased exotic vehicles, and your luxury personal belongings, is permanently seized to pay back the multi-million-dollar damages owed to the Montgomery Trust. This court is officially adjourned." Brandon went completely hysterical. He let out a loud, high-pitched, pathetic scream as two massive federal marshals grabbed his arms, hoisting him off the floor. The heavy steel chains around his ankles rattled horribly down the courtroom aisle as they began dragging him toward the heavy iron cell doors. "Vivienne, no, please, speak to the judge. Tell her we were a family," Brandon shrieked, his voice cracking into a desperate, terrified sob as he looked back at me. "I did it all for us. I wanted to give you a mansion, Vivienne." I stood dead center in the front row of the gallery, wearing a magnificent, custom-tailored royal emerald green executive suit. My hands were calmly draped over my lap, and my emerald eyes watched his extraction with a freezing, absolute calm. I felt no anger. I felt no pity. I only felt the deep, beautiful vindication of my father's timeless wisdom. Victoria Cole lunged toward the iron railing, her fingernails clawing at the air as her son was dragged into the dark corridor. "You parasitic, cold-hearted monster!" Victoria screamed at me, her voice cracking with pure, unadulterated desperation as she realized her family was permanently ruined and homeless. "You set a trap for my son. You hid your wealth just to watch us fall. You are a demon." Harrison Vance stepped firmly in front of her, his towering frame completely blocking her sightline. "Your son set his own trap the moment he decided to use stolen money to look down on the woman who built his entire life, ma'am. Move away from the chairman, or the marshals will arrest you for contempt of court." The very next morning, the grand corporate headquarters of the Montgomery Global Trust was alive with a swift, merciless restructuring. Under my direct supervision as chairman and chief architect of the empire, we launched a massive compliance sweep across every single regional real estate block we owned. I walked into the top-floor executive boardroom, the floor-to-ceiling glass windows offering a sweeping view of the entire New York skyline. The 30 senior board directors stood at absolute attention, their foreheads covered in sweat, their bodies visibly trembling as they waited for my final judgment. They knew that with a single stroke of my pen, I could dissolve their corporate holding contracts and blacklist them from the real estate sector forever. I walked over to the head of the massive obsidian table, my green suit radiating an untouchable, sovereign power. "Harrison," I commanded, my voice slicing through the silent room like a razor. "Yes, Chairman Montgomery." Harrison Vance replied instantly, bowing his head with absolute reverence. "I want the corporate holding agents who approved Brandon Cole's fraudulent lease terminated immediately," I announced coldly. "They were blinded by a flashy suit and failed to verify the underlying asset data. Furthermore, I want a complete restructuring of our Long Island residential blocks. The estate where the Cole family lived is officially converted into a private, premium recovery sanctuary for working-class families and low-income community staff who keep our city buildings breathing. The people who do the real, honest labor are finally going to be treated like the royalty they are. This meeting is adjourned." The board directors bowed in unison, scurrying out of the room like mice escaping a burning castle. The mountain was finally back under the control of its rightful ruler. 1 full year has passed since that freezing night when Brandon Cole slammed a brick of $10,000 against my denim jacket. The Montgomery Global Trust has reached unprecedented heights of sovereign financial power. We completely abolished the short-sighted, elitist policies of the past, investing billions into the infrastructure and welfare of the ground-level workers who keep our real estate networks breathing. I stood in my magnificent glass-walled office at the absolute summit of the Montgomery Sky Tower on Park Avenue, holding a warm porcelain cup of black coffee. The beautiful afternoon sun was setting over the city, casting a golden, peaceful glow across my dark mahogany desk. Sitting in the center of the wood was a beautiful, completely restored silver frame holding the photograph of my late father, Charles Montgomery. Harrison Vance walked into the suite quietly, stepping to my side and placing a secure, leather-bound operational update onto my desk. "The annual judicial disposition updates have just finalized, Chairman," Harrison said with a respectful, proud smile. I opened the file, reviewing the final updates on our legal ledger. Brandon Cole had just completed his first year at the maximum security federal penitentiary. The arrogant financial vice president who once bragged about his luxury lifestyle was now spending 16 hours a day performing grueling, repetitive hard labor in the prison's low-end industrial kitchen. He literally scrubs the burning grease traps, the sticky floors, and the dirty pots with a plastic brush for exactly 12 cents an hour. The exact same dirty labor his mother used to force me to do when she thought I was a helpless maid. As for Victoria Cole, stripped of her leased mansion, her gold chains, and her fake high society status, she lives in a tiny, cramped room in the furthest industrial district. Today, ironies of ironies, she survives entirely on a minimum wage job as an evening cleaning maid at a local public subway terminal. She spent her entire life looking down on the working class, calling them filthy parasites. And now, she spends her nights sweeping up the dirt left behind by the very citizens she tried to banish. I closed the file, looking out at the vast, beautiful horizon of the city. I felt a profound, beautiful peace in my soul. Brandon and his mother truly believed that because I chose to live humbly, work quietly in the dirt, and honor my father's memory with silence, I was an easy target to be crushed, humiliated, and thrown into the rain. They forgot that the true rulers of this world never make noise. They simply own the ground beneath your feet. And when you attempt to stomp on a silent genius, she will let you lease her castle just to watch you get evicted into an absolute terrifying nothingness. Never mistake humility for weakness. Because the quiet helper sweeping your floor today might just own the entire land you stand on tomorrow. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Cold Calm Stories 1. If you believe that karma always delivers the absolute perfect justice, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more deep dive dramatic tales. See you in the next story.